You know, they say love makes you do crazy things, but nobody ever warns you that being a step-parent makes you invisible in all the right ways, and visible in all the wrong ones. My name is Robert Chen, and for 8 years I thought I had mastered the art of being the perfect stepfather. Not the kind you see in movies, the guy who swoops in and becomes everyone's hero overnight. No, I was the quiet kind, the kind who learned that sometimes love is expressed through a mortgage payment made in silence, a college tuition covered without fanfare, and family dinners funded by someone who never gets mentioned in the dinner prayer. Helen used to watch me from across the breakfast table, this little smile playing at the corners of her mouth. You do realize they have no idea, don't you? She would say, stirring her coffee. No idea about what? I would ask, though I always knew exactly what she meant. About how much you do. Marcus still thinks the mortgage fairy pays our bills, and Sarah believes her wedding budget just magically appeared. I would shrug. That's the point, isn't it? If they knew, it wouldn't be about love anymore, it would be about obligation. Helen would reach across the table and squeeze my hand. You're a better man than their father ever was, Rob. I hope someday they realize that. Someday, such a loaded word when you're dealing with stepchildren who see you as temporary. Even after 8 years of marriage. Marcus, 28 and confident in that way that comes from never truly struggling, would nod politely when I offered advice. But his eyes always held that subtle distance, that unspoken reminder that I wasn't really family, not in the way that mattered. Sarah was different, softer, more willing to include me in conversations about her wedding planning or her marketing job. But even she had this habit of referring to major decisions as Morrison family business, as if the name Chen had never entered the equation. I told myself it didn't bother me. After all, I had fallen in love with Helen, not her children. Helen's love was enough. Her love was everything. Our house sat on Maple Street in Kirkland, Washington, a two-story colonial built in 1995, with crown molding and hardwood floors that gleamed under afternoon sun streaming through double-pane windows. I loved that house because it was where Helen taught me that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about showing up. It's about replacing a water heater at midnight or researching orthodontists because your stepdaughter is self-conscious about her smile. Every morning, I would sit in my small office upstairs and review our financial landscape. Bank statements organized by month, investment portfolios balanced to ensure Helen's medical insurance never lapsed, college fund contributions that had quietly grown substantial. Helen had been a school administrator, practical and organized, but her divorce had left her financially vulnerable. She had been so proud of maintaining the house, of keeping everything stable for Marcus and Sarah, that she never let on how precarious things had become. I discovered the truth slowly, the way you discover most important things in marriage. A worried phone call about a late payment, a credit card statement accidentally opened, a conversation with her financial advisor that revealed how close she had come to losing everything. I never want the kids to know, she whispered to me one night, after we had reorganized her finances and set up automatic transfers from my accounts. They've been through enough with the divorce. They need to believe their home is secure. So we built our love story on a foundation of beautiful, necessary lies. Mortgage payments that continued without interruption. Property taxes that never went into arrears. Home improvements that materialized whenever something needed fixing. Marcus and Sarah never asked where the money came from. Why would they? In their minds, this was the natural order. The Morrison family home, maintained by Morrison family resources, with their mother's husband as a welcomed but ultimately peripheral presence. I was okay with being peripheral. I was okay with being invisible. At least, I thought I was. Right up until the morning Helen didn't wake up, and I realized that being the perfect stepfather had been the easy part. The hard part was about to begin. The cancer took Helen on a Tuesday morning in March. 6 weeks from diagnosis to goodbye. Her last words to me were spoken in that hoarse whisper that had replaced her voice. Take care of my children, Rob. They're going to need you more than they realize. I promised her I would. The funeral was everything Helen would have wanted, dignified, simple, filled with stories about her dedication to education. I stood in the receiving line next to Marcus and Sarah, accepting condolences from people who kept saying how lucky Helen was to have found me. But I noticed things during those 3 days. The way Marcus's friends mentioned his plans to expand the business. The way Sarah's husband kept checking his phone, tracking their mortgage application. The way both of them seemed to be looking past their grief towards some future that didn't include their mother's second marriage. 3 days after we buried Helen, they came to the house. I was in the living room, still in my funeral suit, when the doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. Marcus and Sarah stood on the porch like visitors, not family coming home. Marcus wore his usual dealership attire, Sarah her marketing executive outfit. Hi, Robert, Sarah said, her voice carrying that tone people use when delivering bad news. We need to talk. I stepped aside to let them in, though their demeanor made me feel like the visitor. They walked into the living room with the confidence of people who belonged there. Marcus settled into his father's old recliner. Sarah perched on the couch edge. I remained standing. We've been thinking about next steps, Marcus began, businesslike. About practical matters now that Mom is gone. I expected to discuss funeral expenses or estate paperwork. Instead, Marcus pulled out a manila folder and spread documents across the coffee table. This house has been in the Morrison family for 29 years, he continued. Mom worked incredibly hard to maintain it as our family home. Sarah leaned forward, touching what looked like legal documents. We found Mom's will in her safety deposit box, Robert. She was very clear about her intentions regarding family assets. Something about their presentation felt rehearsed. Helen mentioned wanting the house to stay in the Morrison family, I said slowly. Marcus exchanged a glance with Sarah. Which brings us to the difficult part. He pulled out an official-looking document. According to Mom's will, the house passes to Sarah and me as joint inheritors, effective immediately. Immediately? Sarah's voice softened like she used with difficult clients. We know this is hard, Robert. We're grateful for everything you did during Mom's illness. But this house represents our family's stability, our future. Marcus leaned back, confidence growing. We've talked to our attorney. Legally, this is straightforward. As of Mom's death, you no longer have any legal right to live here. The words hit like a physical blow. You're asking me to leave. We're not asking, Robert, Marcus replied, his voice gaining an edge. We're informing you. This house belongs to the Morrison family now. Time for you to find your own place. Sarah pulled out another paper. We've prepared a 30-day notice. That's fair, considering the circumstances. Gives you time to find an apartment, something more appropriate for a single person. I took the paper with shaking hands. 30 days to leave the home I'd lived in for 8 years, where I'd paid mortgage payments they knew nothing about. We're not being cruel, Sarah continued. Marcus is expanding his dealership business, and I need my inheritance share for our new house. This property represents significant equity we need to liquidate. Marcus nodded. Nothing personal, Robert. Just business. You understand business, right? You had a good career at Boeing. You know how these things work. I looked down at the notice. Vacation of premises. Termination of occupancy. Legal action if compliance is not achieved. When I looked up, both watched me with expressions mixing sympathy and determination. They'd decided this weeks ago, probably while their mother was dying. I see, I said quietly. Marcus stood, taking my subdued response as acceptance. We knew you'd be reasonable. Mom always said you were practical. Sarah gathered documents efficiently. We'll check back in a week, see how your moving plans are going. If you need apartment recommendations, I know real estate agents who specialize in senior housing. Senior housing. The word stung. They moved toward the door with satisfied air of people who'd handled an unpleasant task. At the threshold, Marcus turned back. Oh, and Robert, we'd appreciate if you could handle utilities and maintenance until you move out. Keep everything in good shape for the transition. Then they were gone, leaving me holding a paper declaring I no longer belonged in our home. I stood in the doorway watching their cars disappear down Maple Street. Then I closed the door, walked to the living room, and sat in my chair. For the first time since Helen's death, I allowed myself to smile. They had no idea what they'd just started. After Marcus and Sarah left, I sat in that living room for exactly 47 minutes, watching the grandfather clock tick away each second while I processed what had just happened. They wanted me gone in 30 days. They wanted me to pay utilities until I left. Most interesting of all, they had no idea who actually owned the house they were so eager to inherit. I walked upstairs to my office and pulled out the filing cabinet I'd organized over the years. The 2019 financial crisis folder was thick. I opened it slowly, remembering that terrible week when Helen had come to me in tears. She'd been behind on mortgage payments for 3 months. The divorce settlement hadn't been generous. Her ex-husband had stopped child support, and property taxes had doubled. Her teaching salary simply wasn't enough. I'm going to lose the house, Rob, she had whispered at our kitchen table, surrounded by past due notices. 24 years I've lived here. I raised my children here, and I'm going to lose it. I remember doing the math and making a decision that felt natural. What if you didn't have to lose it? What do you mean? What if someone bought the house from the bank, paid off your mortgage, and let you live here? Helen stared at me. Rob, this house is worth $460,000. You can't just, I can, and I will, but on one condition. What condition? The kids never know. As far as Marcus and Sarah are concerned, this is still the Morrison family home that their mother owns. They never need to know their mother almost lost everything. Helen had cried then, tears of relief mixed with shame. I can't let you do this, Rob. It's too much. You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to do it. There's a difference. The transaction took 6 weeks. I bought the house directly from the bank, paid off Helen's mortgage, and transferred the deed into my name. Helen kept living there as my wife, and to the outside world nothing changed. Except now I held the actual deed, title insurance, property tax records, and 5 years of mortgage payments from my retirement account. I opened my laptop and checked my banking app. The automatic transfers that had been running for 5 years, mortgage payment to Wells Fargo, $2,347 monthly, property taxes quarterly, homeowners insurance annually, all from accounts with my name, all for a house with my name on the deed. I called David Park, my old University of Washington roommate who'd built a successful law practice and handled the 2019 purchase. David, it's Rob Chen. I need legal advice. Rob, hey, sorry to hear about Helen. How are you holding up? I've been better. I've got a situation. I explained the 30-day notice, the will claims, and Marcus and Sarah's ownership insistence. David was quiet. Rob, please tell me you still have the deed and purchase documents. Every single page. Good. If they're claiming ownership through Helen's estate, they're about to discover an expensive problem. Helen couldn't will them a house she didn't own. You've been the legal owner for 5 years. That's what I thought. But David, I don't want to just kick them out. These are Helen's children. I promised to take care of them. Taking care of someone doesn't mean letting them steamroll you. What are you thinking? I looked out at Maple Street. Maybe it's time they learned the difference between ownership and entitlement. Maybe they need to understand what it costs to maintain the life they've been taking for granted. You want to teach them a lesson. I want to honor Helen's request. Sometimes taking care of someone means helping them grow up. David chuckled. What did you have in mind? They've asked me to continue paying utilities and maintenance. What if I just stopped? What if those automatic payments keeping this house running suddenly weren't automatic anymore? That's perfectly legal, Rob. Your house, your money, your choice. And if they can't figure out how to pay the bills, then they'll learn that ownership comes with responsibilities they never knew existed. David typed on his computer. Rob, I'm looking at the deed right now. My professional advice? That's why I called. Don't tell them anything yet. Let them make assumptions. Let them proceed with whatever legal action they think they can take. Then, when they've committed to this path, we'll show them exactly who owns what. After hanging up, I looked around my office. Helen's wedding photo smiled at me from the desk where she looked so happy to have found someone who would love her without conditions. I'm going to take care of your children, sweetheart, I said to the photograph, but maybe not the way they expect. I opened my laptop and began canceling automatic bill payments. Mortgage payments scheduled for next week, canceled. Electric bill, canceled. Water bill, canceled. Garbage collection, canceled. One by one, I removed every payment that had been keeping the Morrison family home running for 5 years. Marcus and Sarah were about to discover what it really cost to own a house. And I was about to discover whether Helen's children could learn the lessons their mother always hoped they would. The education was about to begin. The first domino fell on Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after I'd canceled the automatic payments. I was reviewing Boeing pension paperwork when my phone rang. Marcus's name flashed on the caller ID. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello, Marcus. Robert, what the hell is going on with the internet? Sarah tried to work from home yesterday and couldn't get online. The cable company says the account is past due. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the maple tree Helen had loved. That's strange. Have you tried calling them to resolve it? I'm calling you because you handle the bills. What happened to the payment? I don't handle the bills anymore, Marcus, remember? You informed me this isn't my house. I figured that meant the bills weren't my responsibility either. Long pause. I could hear gears turning. Robert, you can't just stop paying bills because you're upset about the inheritance situation. I'm not upset. I'm simply operating under the assumption that homeowners pay their own bills. Since you and Sarah are the owners, according to that will you showed me, it seems logical you'd take care of utilities. We're not ready to take over the financial stuff yet. We're still dealing with probate and legal matters. I understand. That sounds complicated. Marcus's voice took on his car salesman tone. Look, Robert, can you just cover the internet bill for now? We'll reimburse you once everything gets sorted out. How much is the internet bill, Marcus? I don't know. Probably like 50 or 60 bucks. I pulled up my records. According to my files, the internet and cable package runs $147 per month. Plus there's a late fee now, so it's probably closer to 170. Jesus, that's a lot. What do you need all that for? Helen liked the premium movie channels. High-speed internet was necessary for my consulting work. But you're right, it is expensive. You might want to shop around for a more basic package. Can you just pay it this one time? Marcus, since you and Sarah own the house now, and since you've asked me to move out, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to make decisions about your cable package. That's really something you should handle as the homeowners. Heavy breathing on the other end. Fine, we'll take care of it. He hung up without goodbye. 3 days later, the electricity company left a voicemail explaining that service would be disconnected if the past due balance wasn't paid within 48 hours. That afternoon, Sarah called. Robert, hi. I hope you're doing okay. Her marketing presentation voice was carefully modulated. I'm calling about the electric bill. Apparently, there's some kind of mix-up with the automatic payment. No mix-up, Sarah. I canceled the automatic payment last week. You canceled it. Why would you do that? Since you and Marcus are planning to sell the house anyway, I figured you'd want to set up utilities in your own names. It seemed like the responsible thing to do. Robert, we can't just take over all the bills immediately. There are procedures to follow. We need transition time. Of course. How much transition time were you thinking? I don't know, a few months maybe? Just until we get everything organized with the estate. I looked at Helen's picture. Sarah, when you gave me that 30-day notice, were you planning to let the house sit empty for months? Well, no, we were thinking about putting it on the market pretty quickly. So you want to sell a house that doesn't have electricity? Robert, you're being difficult about this. I'm being practical. If you're selling the house, you'll need working utilities for potential buyers. That means taking over the accounts and ensuring bills get paid. It's part of being a homeowner. Sarah's composure started cracking. We don't have money to take over all these bills right now. Marcus is expanding his business, and David and I just put an offer on a new house. We're stretched pretty thin. That does sound challenging. So can you please just keep paying utilities until we get the house sold? We'll pay you back from the proceeds. How much do you think utilities cost, Sarah? I don't know, a couple $100 a month. I pulled up my spreadsheet. Electric bill averages $230 monthly. Gas is about 85. Water and sewer run about 90. Garbage collection is 45. Internet and cable is 147. Security system monitoring is $68 monthly. I could hear her doing math. That's almost $700 a month. 715 to be exact. Plus property taxes of $2,700 per quarter. Plus homeowners insurance at $1,800 per year. Plus maintenance and repairs, which averaged about $4,000 last year. $4,000 in maintenance. Water heater replacement, roof leak repairs, driveway resealing, normal homeowner stuff. Sarah was quiet. Robert, we had no idea it costs so much to maintain this house. Most people don't, until they pay the bills themselves. So what are we supposed to do? That's not for me to say, Sarah. You're the homeowners now. These are homeowner decisions. But we can't afford to pay all those bills while trying to sell the house. Have you considered getting a loan against the property? Or maybe a line of credit using the house as collateral? We can't do that if we're planning to sell it. Then maybe you should reconsider your timeline. Sarah's voice rose. Robert, you're putting us in an impossible position here. I'm not putting you anywhere, Sarah. You chose this position when you decided to claim ownership. Ownership comes with responsibilities. That's how it works. I could hear her talking to someone in the background. When she returned, her voice was strained. How long can we let bills go before services get shut off? Electric usually gives you about 2 weeks after the due date. Water and gas are similar. Internet gets cut pretty quickly. And if the power gets turned off, then the house will be very difficult to show to buyers. Also, if there's no heat, pipes might freeze. That could cause significant damage, especially with winter coming. Long pause. Robert, are you doing this to punish us? I'm not doing anything to you, Sarah. I'm simply not doing things for you anymore. There's a difference. What do you want from us? Good question. What did I want? An apology? Acknowledgement? Respect? I want you and Marcus to understand what it actually costs to own and maintain this house. I want you to appreciate what your mother and I provided for this family. And I want you to make informed decisions about your future. So you'll keep paying bills if we, what? Apologize? This isn't about apologies, Sarah. This is about reality. Someone needs to pay these bills or the house becomes unlivable. The question is, who's going to step up and take responsibility? After Sarah hung up, I sat listening to the house settle around me. In 6 days, Marcus and Sarah would discover whether they were ready to truly own the responsibility they'd claimed. The lights were about to go out. The next morning, while I was having coffee and reading the Seattle Times, I heard a car in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I watched Sarah get out of her Honda, dressed in her handling business outfit, navy blazer, sensible heels, oversized purse. She didn't ring the doorbell. Instead, she used her key from high school. Robert, she called from the entryway. Are you home? In the kitchen, Sarah. She appeared looking like someone who hadn't slept well. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back hastily, and dark circles showed under her eyes. We need to talk, she said, settling into Helen's chair. She placed her purse on the table and pulled out a manila folder. Robert, I spent yesterday afternoon doing research about the house, about the finances. I folded my newspaper. That sounds like a smart approach. I went to the bank. I wanted to understand the mortgage situation. Maybe transfer the account into our names. What did you find out? Sarah opened her folder and spread documents across the table. Bank statements, loan documents, payment histories. The mortgage representative, Mrs. Patterson, was very helpful. She pulled up all the account information. I sipped my coffee and waited. Robert, according to their records, you've been the sole mortgage holder since September 2019. Your name is on everything. The original loan documents, the refinancing from 2020, every single payment for 5 years. That sounds accurate. Her marketing mask slipped, revealing something rawer. Mrs. Patterson also mentioned you refinanced in 2020 to cover medical expenses. You took out an additional $47,000. Helen's cancer treatments were expensive. Even with insurance, there were costs. You paid for Mom's cancer treatment. We paid for it, Sarah, Helen and I. We were married. Sarah stared at the documents. Marcus and I never knew about any of this. We never knew Mom was in financial trouble. We never knew about the refinancing. We never knew you were paying the mortgage. That was intentional. Helen specifically requested that you and Marcus not know about the financial difficulties. She wanted you both to feel secure about the family home. Why didn't she tell us? Your mother was proud. She'd worked hard to provide stability after the divorce. The idea that she might lose the house would have been devastating for her to admit to her children. Sarah picked up a bank statement, studying the payment history. 5 years of mortgage payments. That's a lot of money. About $284,000, including the medical expenses. She ran her finger down the columns of numbers. Mrs. Patterson said something else. She said that legally, since you're the mortgage holder and your name is on the deed, you have every right to live here indefinitely. Any inheritance claims would need to go through probate court, with proof that Mom actually owned the property. Mrs. Patterson sounds like she knows her business. Robert, do you have a copy of Mom's actual will? I don't think your mother had a current will, Sarah. She mentioned needing to update it several times, but we never scheduled an appointment with an attorney. Sarah's face went pale. What do you mean she didn't have a will? The document Marcus showed me looked like something he found online or had someone draft up. It didn't look like anything from a lawyer's office or properly notarized. But Marcus said he found it in Mom's safety deposit box. Did you see the safety deposit box yourself? Did you go with him to the bank? No, he said he handled all of that. He brought me the documents and explained what they meant. I watched Sarah process this information, saw the moment when implications began to sink in. Her marketing training had taught her to analyze situations, look for inconsistencies, ask the right questions. Sarah, what exactly did Marcus tell you about your mother's estate? She scrolled through her phone. He said since Mom owned the house free and clear, it would automatically pass to us as her children. He said you were just living here as Mom's husband, but didn't have any legal claim. And you believe that? Why wouldn't I? Marcus handles financial transactions at the dealership. He understands legal documents. And honestly, it made sense that Mom would leave the family home to her children. That would make sense if your mother had owned the house. But she didn't own it. You do? That's correct. So the will that Marcus showed you wouldn't be legally valid. Even if it were real, you can't will someone else's property to your heirs. Sarah was quiet for several minutes, staring at the evidence. When she looked up, her eyes were red. Robert, I think my brother lied to me. What makes you say that? Because if he really found Mom's will in a safety deposit box, he would have asked me to come with him. We've always handled family business together. And if the will was real, he would have wanted me to see it myself, not just show me copies. She gathered the papers. I think Marcus created those documents. He's been talking about expanding the dealership for months. He's frustrated because he can't get financing. When Mom got sick, he started making comments about the inheritance, about how the house would solve his financial problems. She stood up, clutching her folder. Robert, I owe you an enormous apology. We both do, but especially me because I should have done this research before we came here with those demands. Apology accepted. What happens now? I looked at her standing in Helen's kitchen, holding proof of 5 years of financial support she'd never known about, and thought about my promise to Helen about taking care of her children. Now, Sarah, you and I need to have a conversation with Marcus, because it's time for your brother to understand exactly what he's gotten himself into. He's not going to like what we have to tell him. No, I agreed. He's not. That Saturday afternoon, I arranged what I told Marcus would be a family meeting to clarify the estate situation. Sarah had agreed to attend as my ally, though she was nervous about confronting her brother. Marcus arrived exactly on time, carrying his briefcase and wearing the confident expression that suggested he thought this meeting would go his way. He'd brought someone, a thin man in an ill-fitting suit, who introduced himself as Tom Bradley, legal consultant. Robert, Marcus said, settling into the living room like he owned it. I'm glad you've decided to be reasonable about this situation. Tom here specializes in estate transfers. He's going to help us expedite the paperwork so you can get moved out without unnecessary delays. I remained standing while they made themselves comfortable. Sarah sat on the couch edge, her folder of bank documents beside her. Before we begin, I said, I think there are some things we need to clarify about the ownership of this house. Marcus waved dismissively. Robert, we've already been through this. The will is clear. Mom left the house to Sarah and me. Tom has reviewed everything, and he says the transfer should be straightforward. Tom Bradley opened his briefcase and pulled out papers. Miss Chen, I understand your attachment to this property, but legally speaking, your occupancy rights terminated with your wife's death. What we're proposing is a reasonable transition period that benefits everyone. I looked at Sarah, who nodded slightly. It was time. Actually, Tom, I think you might want to review your legal analysis. Sarah, would you mind sharing what you discovered at the bank? Sarah opened her folder with trembling hands. Marcus, I went to Wells Fargo yesterday to inquire about transferring the mortgage into our names. Marcus's confident expression flickered. Why would you do that without talking to me first? Because I wanted to understand our financial responsibilities as the new owners. But here's what I found out. She spread the bank documents across the coffee table. Robert has been the sole mortgage holder since September 2019. His name is on the deed, the loan documents, and every payment record for the past 5 years. Tom Bradley leaned forward to examine the papers, his face growing pale. That's impossible, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its earlier certainty. Mom owned this house. She bought it after her divorce. She did buy it after her divorce, I said, but she lost it in 2019 due to financial difficulties. I purchased it from the bank to prevent foreclosure. Your mother continued living here as my wife, but I've been the legal owner for 5 years. Marcus stood up abruptly. That's ridiculous. If you owned the house, why didn't you say something when we served you with the 30-day notice? Because I was curious to see how far you'd take this charade. I wanted to understand whether you genuinely believed your mother owned the property, or whether you knew you were lying. I wasn't lying. Mom told us she owned the house free and clear. Sarah looked up from the documents. Marcus, show Robert the will you found in Mom's safety deposit box. What? The will? The one you said you found when you went to the bank. Show it to him. Marcus glanced at Tom Bradley, who was studying the bank documents with increasing alarm. I don't have it with me right now. That's interesting, I said, because according to Sarah's research, your mother didn't have a safety deposit box at Wells Fargo. In fact, she didn't have one anywhere. I know because I helped her consolidate all her accounts in 2019. Tom Bradley closed his briefcase and stood up. Mr. Morrison, I think there's been a significant misunderstanding about the legal status of this property. Based on these documents, I cannot in good conscience proceed with any transfer paperwork. Where are you going? Marcus demanded. I'm leaving before I become an accessory to fraud. Tom Bradley headed for the door. Mr. Chen, I apologize for any inconvenience. Mr. Morrison, I suggest you consult with a real attorney about your situation. After Tom left, the three of us sat in silence. Marcus stared at the bank documents like they might change if he looked hard enough. This doesn't make sense, he finally said. Why would Mom let us believe she owned the house if she didn't? Because she was ashamed, Sarah said gently. She didn't want us to know she'd almost lost everything. She didn't want us to feel insecure about our family home. But she should have told us. We could have helped. I sat down across from Marcus, no longer the displaced stepfather, but the homeowner addressing an unwelcome guest. Marcus, what kind of help could you have provided? In 2019, you were 23 years old, working entry-level at the dealership. Sarah was finishing college. Your mother owed 3 months of back mortgage payments plus penalties. That was over $15,000. And it was growing every day. Marcus's face reddened. We could have figured something out. Your mother and I did figure something out. I bought the house, paid off her debts, and allowed her to maintain her dignity in front of her children. For 5 years, I've paid every bill, every tax, every repair cost. I've invested nearly $300,000 in this property. So what do you want? You want us to pay you back? The question hung in the air. What did I want? Helen had asked me to take care of her children. But what did that mean now? I want you to understand what ownership actually means, Marcus. It's not just about having your name on a deed or collecting rental income. It's about responsibility. It's about maintenance and taxes and insurance and repairs. It's about making sacrifices to keep a roof over your family's heads. Sarah was crying quietly, staring at the documents that proved how much her mother and I had hidden from them. I want you to appreciate what your mother provided for this family. I continued. She worked 2 jobs after your father left. She drove a 15-year-old car so she could afford your college expenses. She ate generic groceries so you could have name-brand clothes. And when she couldn't do it anymore, she married a man who could help her, and she trusted him enough to let him save her home. Marcus's shoulders slumped. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked younger than his 28 years. I also want you to understand what I've provided. Not because I had to, but because I chose to. Because I loved your mother, and she asked me to take care of her children. So where does that leave us? Sarah asked. I looked around the living room where Helen and I had spent so many quiet evenings. This house held 8 years of memories, but it also held the promise I'd made to a dying woman. It leaves us with a choice, I said. I can continue living here as the homeowner, making all the decisions, or I can sell the house and move somewhere more appropriate for a widower. Or we can figure out an arrangement that honors your mother's memory and respects the investments I've made, while also giving you both an opportunity to learn what it really means to be responsible for a family home. Marcus looked up hopefully. What kind of arrangement? That depends on whether you're ready to stop lying to your sister and start having honest conversations about money, responsibility, and family. Marcus glanced at Sarah, then back at me. The will was fake. I created it because I needed money for the dealership expansion, and I thought Mom owed us something for all the years of struggle. Sarah closed her eyes. Marcus, I'm sorry. I didn't know Robert had been supporting us. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where Helen and I had built our life together. Marcus, here's what's going to happen. You're going to call off any plans to sell this house or claim inheritance rights you don't have. You're going to apologize to your sister for lying to her and involving her in your scheme. Okay. And then, if you're interested, we're going to discuss what it might look like for you and Sarah to gradually take on some real responsibility for this property. Not ownership. You haven't earned that yet. But responsibility. I turned back to face them. Your mother asked me to take care of her children. I'm going to honor that promise. But from now on, taking care of you means teaching you to take care of yourselves. For the first time in 2 weeks, the house felt like home again. But the real education was just beginning. 2 weeks after our family meeting, I thought we had reached an understanding. Marcus had apologized. Sarah was working with me on house responsibilities. And for the first time since Helen's death, there was peace. I should have known it wouldn't last. The trouble started with a certified letter from Jameson, Bradley and Associates, a law firm I'd never heard of. The letter was professionally crafted, intimidating, and completely unexpected. Mr. Chen, it began, we represent Marcus Morrison and Sarah Morrison Williams in matters pertaining to the estate of Helen Morrison and the wrongful occupation of property located at 1247 Maple Street, Kirkland, Washington. I called David Park immediately. David, I need you to look at something. I'm scanning it over now. There was silence while David read. When he came back, his voice was grim. Rob, this is serious. They're alleging elder abuse, financial manipulation, and fraudulent property transfer. They're claiming you coerced Helen into signing over the house while she was under medical duress. That's completely false. Helen was perfectly competent in 2019. She was grateful for the help. I know that, but they're painting a different picture. They're saying you isolated Helen from her children, controlled her finances, and used her illness to your advantage. They want you out within 30 days, and they're demanding full restitution plus damages. Can they do this? They can try. Elder abuse cases get attention from judges. If they convince a court that Helen wasn't acting freely when the property transferred, they might challenge the whole transaction. That afternoon, Marcus and Sarah arrived together. But this wasn't the same Marcus who had confessed 2 weeks earlier. This was the confident, aggressive version I'd met at Helen's funeral, backed by legal firepower. Robert, Marcus said, walking into the living room like he owned it again. We need to talk. Sarah followed, looking uncomfortable but determined. We've been thinking about our conversation, and we've decided we need a different approach. I remained seated, the legal letter beside me. I see you've hired attorneys. We had to, Marcus said, settling into his father's recliner. After doing research, we discovered troubling things about how you acquired this house. Such as, Sarah pulled out a folder. We spoke with elder law attorneys, Robert. They explained that what you did in 2019 might constitute financial abuse of a vulnerable adult. Financial abuse. Marcus leaned forward, his voice prosecutorial. Think about it from an outside perspective, Robert. A recently divorced woman struggling financially meets a man with significant retirement savings. Within 2 years, he's convinced her to let him take over her major assets. Within 3 years, she's diagnosed with terminal cancer. Within 5 years, she's dead, and he owns everything she worked for. The accusations hit like physical blows. That's not what happened. Isn't it? Sarah asked. We've talked to Mom's friends from school. They said she seemed different after she married you. More withdrawn, less likely to discuss financial matters. Several people mentioned she seemed anxious whenever money came up. She was anxious about money because she was embarrassed about almost losing the house. I was helping preserve her dignity. Marcus shook his head. Or you were isolating her from people who might have questioned what you were doing. Did you know Mom never told any of her friends about the mortgage troubles? As far as they knew, she owned the house free and clear. The only person who knew about her financial problems was you, because she asked me not to tell anyone. According to you, Sarah said. But there's no documentation of that request, is there? No written record of Helen asking you to keep her financial situation secret. No witnesses to those conversations. I realized how differently our private arrangements could be interpreted. Every loving gesture, every financial sacrifice could be reframed as manipulation. The attorneys explained something else. Marcus continued. In Washington state, there are specific laws about property transfers involving vulnerable adults. If someone over 65 transfers property to a non-family member, especially someone they've known for less than 5 years, the courts can reverse those transfers if there's evidence of undue influence. Helen wasn't vulnerable. She was intelligent and capable. She was also recently divorced, financially desperate, and probably feeling alone, Sarah said. The kind of emotional state that makes people susceptible to manipulation. Marcus walked to the window. Here's what's going to happen, Robert. You're going to transfer the deed back to Helen's estate voluntarily. We'll allow you to continue living here for 6 months while you find housing. In exchange, we won't pursue the financial abuse allegations. And if I don't agree, then we take this to court, Sarah said, pulling out another document. We've already filed preliminary paperwork. We have affidavits from Helen's friends about her changed behavior. We have medical records showing her stress levels during the period when you took over the house. We have financial experts who will testify that the property transfer was detrimental to Helen's interests. Marcus sat back down, confidence growing. We also have something else, Robert. We hired a private investigator to look into your background. My blood ran cold. What kind of investigation? The kind that discovered you were married before Helen, to a woman named Margaret Chen who died in 2008. A woman who, according to court records, left you as sole beneficiary of substantial life insurance and retirement accounts. Sarah opened another folder. Margaret was also older than you, Robert. 62 when you married her, 68 when she died. And according to her medical records, she changed her will to include you just 18 months before her death from cancer. They had twisted every fact of my life into a pattern of predatory behavior. Margaret, my first wife whom I had loved deeply, was being painted as another victim. Margaret was my wife for 15 years. I loved her. I took care of her. I'm sure you did, Marcus said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Just like you took care of Mom. Just like you convinced both of them to trust you with their finances when they were at their most vulnerable. You're making it sound like I'm some kind of professional con artist who targets sick women. Are you? Sarah asked quietly. The question hung in the air like poison. I looked at these two people I had tried to love as my own children and realized they had spent weeks building a case designed to destroy me completely. The choice is yours, Robert, Marcus said, standing again. Voluntary transfer and a quiet departure, or a very public court battle that will expose every detail of your relationships with both Margaret and Mom. Either way, we're getting the house back. The question is whether you want to preserve whatever reputation you have left. After they left, I sat alone for hours. The legal documents told a story I barely recognized, where my love for Helen was reframed as manipulation, where my financial help was portrayed as exploitation, where my grief was painted as guilt. I called David Park again. David, they've hired investigators. They're bringing up Margaret. There was a long pause. Rob, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Is there anything about your relationship with Helen or with Margaret that could be misinterpreted? Anything that might look questionable to a judge? I loved them both, I took care of them both, I made financial sacrifices for them both. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if there's anything that could look like a pattern of targeting older women for financial gain. The question devastated me because I could see how someone might construct that narrative. Two older wives, both of whom had died and left me financially better off. David, what are my chances if this goes to court? Another long pause. Honestly, in the current legal climate around elder abuse, with the narrative they're building, even if we win, the process will destroy you. The publicity alone could ruin your reputation permanently. That night, I sat in the house Helen and I had shared, surrounded by 8 years of memories, and faced the possibility that I might lose everything. Not just the house, but my reputation, my dignity, and any hope of honoring the promise I'd made to a dying woman. For the first time since Helen's death, I wondered if Marcus and Sarah were right about one thing. Maybe I should just walk away. I spent 3 sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, replaying Marcus and Sarah's accusations over and over. By Thursday morning, I had almost convinced myself that maybe they were right. Maybe I should just sign the papers, take whatever dignity I had left, and disappear. That's when David Park called with news that changed everything. Rob, I need you to come to my office immediately and bring everything you have related to Helen's medical care and your marriage. David, what's going on? Just trust me. I think I've found something that might help us. An hour later, I sat in David's downtown Seattle office, surrounded by boxes of documents I'd carefully preserved over the years. David was hunched over his computer, occasionally pulling papers from my files and cross-referencing them with something on his screen. Rob, tell me about Helen's cancer diagnosis. When exactly did she first see the oncologist? March 15th. I remember because it was the day after our anniversary. She'd been having symptoms for a couple of months, but we thought it was just stress from work. David typed something, then looked up with the first smile I'd seen from him in weeks. And you said Marcus and Sarah claim Helen changed her behavior after you got married, right? That she became more withdrawn and secretive about financial matters? That's what they told their attorneys, according to the legal brief. Rob, I think Marcus and Sarah just made a very expensive mistake. David turned his computer screen toward me. I've been going through Helen's medical records, and I found something interesting. Look at this. He pointed to a series of dates and doctor visits. Helen was seeing a psychologist, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, starting in January 2019. The sessions continued until August 2019, right around the time you helped her with the house purchase. I didn't know Helen was seeing a psychologist. She was, and according to Dr. Martinez's notes, which I've subpoenaed as part of our defense preparation, Helen was suffering from severe anxiety and depression following her divorce. But here's the important part. Dr. Martinez documented Helen's decision-making process regarding the house situation in detail. David pulled out a thick folder. Helen discussed her financial crisis with Dr. Martinez extensively. She talked about her embarrassment, her fear of losing the house, and her gratitude when you offered to help. Dr. Martinez's notes make it very clear that Helen was not only mentally competent during this period, but that she specifically chose not to tell Marcus and Sarah about the financial problems because she was protecting them. I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. There's more, David continued. Dr. Martinez documented several sessions where Helen expressed frustration with Marcus's entitlement and Sarah's financial dependence. Helen specifically stated that she didn't want her children to know about the crisis because she was afraid they would try to interfere or make demands she couldn't meet. So Helen's withdrawal wasn't because I was isolating her from her children. According to a licensed mental health professional who was seeing her regularly, Helen's changed behavior was due to her efforts to protect Marcus and Sarah from the reality of her financial situation. She was deliberately avoiding topics that might reveal her vulnerability because she wanted to maintain their sense of security. David opened another file. But here's the real trump card, Rob. In her final session with Dr. Inez, just 2 weeks before she stopped therapy, Helen made a very specific statement about you. He handed me a typed transcript. Helen told Dr. Martinez, and I quote, I know Robert is making a tremendous financial sacrifice to help me keep this house. I also know that Marcus and Sarah would never understand or appreciate what he's doing for our family. That's why I've asked him to never tell them how much he's contributed. I want my children to feel secure, but I also want to protect Robert from their judgment and potential resentment. I stared at the document, reading Helen's words in black and white. After all these weeks of having my motives questioned and my love reframed as manipulation, here was proof that Helen had not only consented to our arrangements, but had specifically requested the secrecy that Marcus and Sarah were now using against me. David, this changes everything, doesn't it? It obliterates their case. They've built their entire argument on the premise that you isolated Helen and coerced her into secrecy. But we have a neutral third party, a licensed psychologist, who documented that the secrecy was Helen's idea and that she was protecting both you and her children. David's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and smiled grimly. Speak of the devil. It's Jameson, Bradley and Associates, Marcus and Sarah's law firm. He answered the call on speaker. David Park. Mr. Park, this is Jonathan Jameson. I represent the Morrison family in the matter of the Maple Street property. I understand you're representing Mr. Chen. That's correct. I'm calling to see if your client has reconsidered our generous settlement offer. We're prepared to allow him 6 months to relocate, and we won't pursue the elder abuse allegations if he transfers the property voluntarily. David looked at me and winked. Actually, Mr. Wang. Jameson, I think there's been a misunderstanding about the strength of your case. Have you had a chance to review the psychological records for Mrs. Morrison, specifically her sessions with Dr. Rebecca Martinez during the period in question? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. What psychological records? The ones where Mrs. Morrison explicitly discussed her decision to keep her financial arrangements with my client confidential in order to protect her children from worry and my client from their potential resentment. The ones where she expressed gratitude for his financial assistance and specifically stated that she didn't want Marcus and Sarah to know about her crisis. Another pause, longer this time. We weren't aware of any psychological treatment. I can fax you the relevant excerpts if you'd like. Dr. Martinez is prepared to testify that Mrs. Morrison was not only mentally competent during the period when she and my client arranged the property transfer, but that she was the one who insisted on keeping the arrangement private. The silence stretched so long I wondered if the call had been disconnected. Mr. Park, Jameson finally said, his voice notably less confident, perhaps we should schedule a meeting to discuss this matter further. I think that's an excellent idea. I should mention, though, that given the false accusations your clients have made against my client, we're now considering filing a countersuit for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Dr. Martinez's records make it very clear that your clients have fundamentally misrepresented their mother's mental state and decision-making process. Let me discuss this with my clients and get back to you. After Jameson hung up, David leaned back in his chair with a satisfied expression. Rob, I think Marcus and Sarah are about to discover that attacking a man's character without doing proper investigation is a very expensive mistake. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. What happens next? Next, we go on the offensive. We schedule a meeting with Marcus, Sarah, and their attorneys. We present Dr. Martinez's records, and we watch them realize that not only do they have no case against you, but that they've opened themselves up to significant legal liability. I looked out the window at the Seattle skyline, thinking about Helen and the promise I'd made to take care of her children. David, I still want to honor Helen's wishes about taking care of Marcus and Sarah, but I think it's time they learned what Helen really thought about family, sacrifice, and gratitude. I think Helen would approve of the lesson you're about to teach them. The meeting took place the following Tuesday in David Park's conference room. Marcus and Sarah arrived with their attorney, Jonathan Jameson, who looked considerably less confident than he had sounded on the phone. I sat across from them with David beside me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Before we begin, David said, placing a thick folder on the table, I want to establish some ground rules. This meeting is being recorded, and everything discussed here is on the record. Mr. Jameson, I assume your clients understand that any false statements they make could expose them to additional legal liability. Jameson nodded nervously. My clients are here in good faith to resolve this matter. Excellent. David opened the folder and spread out documents with the same methodical precision I remembered from our college days. Let's start with the fundamental premise of your case, that my client manipulated Mrs. Morrison into transferring property while she was in a vulnerable state. He slid a document across the table. This is a transcript from Mrs. Morrison's session with Dr. Rebecca Martinez on August 12, 2019. Dr. Martinez, please note, is a licensed clinical psychologist with no relationship to my client. Would you like me to read the relevant passage aloud? Marcus leaned forward. We can read it ourselves. I think it's important that everyone hears this, David continued. He cleared his throat and began reading in his courtroom voice. Patient states, I need Robert to understand that I don't want the children to know about our financial arrangement. They would either feel guilty about accepting help, or they would resent him for being in a position to provide it. This way they can maintain their sense of security, and Robert doesn't have to deal with their complicated feelings about money. Sarah's face went pale. Mom said that? There's more. David turned the page. Patient continues. Robert thinks he's protecting me by taking care of the house situation, but I think I'm protecting all of them, Robert from judgment, and Marcus and Sarah from having to face how close we came to losing everything. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That doesn't change the fact that Robert took advantage of a vulnerable situation. Actually, it does. David slid another document across the table. This is Dr. Martinez's professional assessment of your mother's mental state during the period in question. Would you like me to summarize her findings? Please do, Jameson said, though he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Dr. Martinez concluded that Mrs. Morrison was not only mentally competent, but that she was demonstrating what the doctor called exceptional emotional intelligence in managing a complex family dynamic. The doctor noted that Mrs. Morrison was deliberately choosing to protect multiple people simultaneously, even at the cost of her own stress levels. I watched Marcus and Sarah absorb this information. The confidence they'd carried into the room was evaporating with each revelation. Now, David continued, let's address the financial aspects of this case. My client has prepared a complete accounting of his contributions to your family over the past 5 years. He pulled out a laptop and opened a spreadsheet that I'd spent hours preparing. Robert, would you walk us through these numbers? I stood up, no longer the defendant but the injured party presenting evidence. I've broken this down into categories to make it easier to understand. I turned the laptop screen toward them. Housing costs. Mortgage payments from September 2019 through Helen's death, $284,300. Property taxes for the same period, $32,800. Homeowners insurance, $9,600. Sarah was taking notes, her hand shaking slightly. Medical expenses. Helen's cancer treatment. After insurance, $67,400. This includes the additional refinancing I arranged to cover experimental treatments not covered by her school district insurance. Marcus looked up from the spreadsheet. $67,000. Your mother didn't want you to know how expensive her care was. She was worried you'd feel obligated to contribute money you didn't have, or that you'd pressure her to choose less expensive treatment options. Home maintenance and improvements, $41,200. This includes the roof repair after the storm in 2020, the HVAC replacement in 2021, and the foundation work in 2022. Personal support for family members, I said, clicking to the next category. Sarah's wedding expenses that I covered when the original budget wasn't sufficient, $28,000. Marcus's car down payment when his credit application was denied, $15,000. Various other family expenses, $12,700. The room was completely silent except for the sound of Sarah's pen scratching across her notepad. Total financial contribution over 5 years, $491,000. I closed the laptop and sat back down. Now, Marcus, you've accused me of taking advantage of your mother. I'd like you to explain to me exactly what advantage I gained from investing nearly $500,000 in your family's well-being. Marcus stared at the table. We didn't know. That was the point. Your mother specifically requested that you not know because she understood that knowledge comes with obligation. She didn't want you to feel guilty about accepting help, and she didn't want me to become a target for resentment or manipulation. Sarah looked up from her notes, tears in her eyes. Robert, we owe you an apology. You owe me more than that, I said calmly. You've spent the last month assassinating my character, investigating my past relationships, and threatening to destroy my reputation. You've accused me of elder abuse and financial manipulation. You've forced me to hire attorneys and defend against frivolous legal claims. Jameson cleared his throat. Mr. Chen, in light of this new information, I think we should discuss a resolution that's acceptable to all parties. I'm not finished, I said, my voice carrying the authority I'd learned from 30 years of engineering presentations. You've also fundamentally misunderstood what your mother asked me to do when she was dying. I pulled out the last document, Helen's handwritten note from her final week in the hospital. Your mother wrote this 4 days before she died. She was weak, but her mind was clear. Should I read it aloud? Marcus nodded reluctantly. Robert, I know you'll want to take care of Marcus and Sarah after I'm gone. Please remember that taking care of someone sometimes means letting them face the consequences of their choices. I've protected them too much. Help them learn to be adults who understand gratitude and responsibility. I folded the note and put it back in my pocket. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to withdraw your legal claims, pay your own attorney fees, and publicly apologize for the accusations you've made. And then, Sarah asked quietly, and then we're going to figure out what it looks like for you to gradually earn the privilege of being part of this family again. Not through inheritance or legal claims, but through demonstrating the kind of character your mother hoped you would develop. I stood up and walked to the window. Your mother asked me to take care of her children. I've been doing that for 5 years. The question is whether you're ready to learn what she actually meant by family. 3 months later, on what would have been Helen's 65th birthday, I stood in the kitchen making coffee and watching the first snow dust the maple tree in our front yard. The house felt different now, not because anything had physically changed, but because the relationships within it had been rebuilt on honesty rather than assumptions. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock. I opened it to find Sarah holding a small wrapped gift and Marcus carrying a box of pastries from Helen's favorite bakery. Good morning, Robert, Sarah said, her voice carrying respectful warmth that had replaced her earlier entitlement. We brought Mom's favorite cinnamon rolls. She would have appreciated that, I said, stepping aside to let them in. Coffee's ready. Over the past 3 months, we had slowly, carefully reconstructed what it meant to be a family. The legal resolution had been straightforward. Marcus and Sarah had withdrawn their claims, issued public apologies, and paid their attorney fees. But rebuilding trust had required patience from all of us. Marcus settled into his usual spot on the couch, no longer his father's recliner, which we had silently agreed belonged to the past. Robert, I've been thinking about something you said, about earning the privilege of being part of this family. What about it? I think I'm starting to understand what you meant, and what Mom meant in that letter she wrote. Sarah opened her gift, a framed photo of Helen from her last birthday, surrounded by flowers from the garden she had loved. I brought this for the mantle. I thought Mom should be here with us today. I placed it next to the other family photos, thinking about how much Helen would have enjoyed seeing her children finally beginning to grow into the adults she had hoped they would become. Robert, Sarah continued, I need to ask you something. Do you regret everything that's happened? All the conflict, all the accusations, all the pain we put you through? I considered the question while pouring coffee. I regret that you felt you had to go through lawyers to have a conversation with me. I regret that it took a crisis for you to understand what your mother was trying to teach you. But I don't regret that it happened. Why not? Because Helen was right. Taking care of someone sometimes means letting them face the consequences of their choices. You both needed to learn that actions have costs, that relationships require respect, and that entitlement destroys families. Marcus nodded slowly. I've been working with a financial advisor trying to understand how to actually manage money instead of just spending it. The numbers you showed us in that meeting, Robert, I had no idea how much sacrifice was involved in maintaining a family home. Most people don't, until they have to do it themselves. I keep thinking about Mom working 2 jobs after Dad left, eating generic food so we could have name-brand clothes. I never thanked her for that. She didn't do it for thanks, Marcus. She did it because that's what parents do. But recognition and gratitude matter. They're how we show that we understand the value of what we've been given. Sarah pulled out a manila envelope. Speaking of understanding value, I have something for you. Inside was a check made out to me for $25,000. Sarah, what is this? It's my contribution toward Mom's medical expenses. I know it doesn't cover everything you paid, but it's what I can afford right now. Marcus and I have been talking, and we want to start paying you back. I stared at the check. This isn't necessary. Yes, it is, Marcus said firmly. Not because you need the money, but because we need to give it. We need to start taking responsibility for our family instead of just taking from it. Marcus pulled out his own envelope. Mine's for $15,000. It's not as much as Sarah's, but I'm still paying off business debts. I'll have another payment for you in 6 months. I looked at these two people who had spent months trying to destroy my reputation, and realized that Helen's final lesson was finally taking hold. There's something else, Sarah said. David and I have been talking about the future, about what happens when our kids are old enough to visit their grandmother's house. What do you mean? I mean, this house needs to stay in the family, Robert. Not because of inheritance or legal claims, but because it's where our family's story lives. I want my children to know the kitchen where their grandmother made Sunday dinners, and the garden where she grew tomatoes. Marcus leaned forward. We've been thinking that maybe, when you're ready, we could work out an arrangement where Sarah and I gradually take on more house responsibilities. Not ownership. We understand now that ownership has to be earned. But partnership. What kind of partnership? The kind where we contribute to maintenance and upkeep, where we help with property taxes and insurance, where we prove that we can be trusted with the legacy Mom left us. I walked to the window and looked out at the neighborhood where Helen and I had built our life together. The snow was falling more heavily now, transforming the familiar landscape into something clean and new. Your mother would be proud of you, I said finally. Both of you. Do you think she knew? Sarah asked. Do you think she knew that we would need to go through all this conflict to finally understand what she was trying to teach us? I thought about Helen's final letter, about her request that I help her children learn to be adults who understood gratitude and responsibility. I think your mother was wiser than any of us realized. I think she knew that some lessons can't be taught, they have to be experienced. Marcus stood up and walked to Helen's photo on the mantel. Happy birthday, Mom. We finally get it. As I watched Helen's children honor her memory, I realized that the promise I had made to a dying woman was finally being fulfilled. Not in the way I had originally imagined, but in the way Helen had always intended. Taking care of her children hadn't meant protecting them from consequences. It had meant helping them become people worthy of the love and sacrifice she had given them. And for the first time since Helen's death, the house on Maple Street truly felt like home again.